Hello and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and our favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my stupendous co-host with me today, Matt Rossi. How are you doing today, Matt?
I am okay. Let's do the show.
All right,
I don't want to risk anything.
It's been a weird day for technology here in the recording studio, and by recording studio, I mean our houses. I don't know. If you listened to last week's episode of the Blizzard Watch podcast, there was a technical difficulty where apparently my voice decided that it was going to bottom out everywhere, just for like a 3-minute period of time. And then we had the same thing where it was we were starting this recording. So a little peek behind the curtain. But I'm sure you don't want to hear about that. Instead, I think you want to hear what we have to talk about today, which are questions from you, our wonderful listeners. So if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you want to hit us up on Discord, we have 2 channels set aside for you. We have one, which is just the Q and Podcast Questions channel, open for everyone. The rules apply there as well for the whole subject and what show it's for and the pronunciations of your name. If you are a Patreon subscriber, however, there is a patron Q and Podcast Questions channel where we tend to look there first for our questions as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. And if none of those are good for you and you happen to be a Patreon subscriber, you can also submit those questions on Patreon directly, and we will be sure to get those into the show as we can. But without further ado, let's start with one from Scribbly. Thank you. You actually put the pronunciation in there, and I was just being a fool and didn't read it. Ha! Go me. Hey, Lore Watch. So appreciative that you selected and answered my language question recently, and also would love an episode where you noodle on languages in WoW. I love linguistics and conlangs. One day, Matt and I will go into a deep dive about this stuff, because I know Matt and I have had plenty of discussions about that in tabletop games, and I absolutely have no doubt that we can tear apart the World of Warcraft. My question today is, based on the story presented so far in The War Within, do you see Faerin being set up as a love interest for Anduin? And if so, how would you envision that story going, and what would some of the ramifications be? I think this is a very popular theory going around. A lot of people seem to really be latching onto that and think that she is going to be the love interest. I am very curious, though. What do you think, Matt?
I mean, there's a difference between do I think it's going to happen and do I think it's a good idea.
Well, let's start with the first one. Do you think it's going to happen?
It feels like it's right now, I'd say it's at about a 65% chance, and it's inching towards inexorable inevitability. I think there are ways that they might be planning to subvert it, but I do see like why people think this is likely. And I don't disagree with their interpretations of it. Let me put it that way.
Okay, and do you think it's a good idea?
Absolutely not.
All right, let's start. The door has been opened. So
here's the thing: it's not because I don't like Faerin.
I love the character, yeah, but
I think in general, I find it dicey to introduce a character just to be the love interest for another character. Mm-hmm. I didn't like it with Agra, and I felt like it caused Agra to get really shoved to the side once her role was established. We have not seen a lot of Agra since, and it's one of those things that it really bothers me. I don't like that. I wouldn't like it for any character. And secondly, Faerin has had such an interesting story that I don't want her to just become, I'm here to heal Anduin with the power of positivity, and now he can go on and do his king stuff, and I will be in the background being, Anduin's girlfriend for the rest of the story. I don't want that. If anything, I wouldn't mind if Anduin retired and went to live on a farm somewhere while Faerin went on to have adventures, and he could just be Faerin's boyfriend. Because we've had a lot of Anduin, and whilst I like the voice actor who does Anduin, and I'm even willing to say that at times I've liked Anduin as a character, he has generally, at best, been a B tier for me, if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Faerin has potential to go up to S rank, and I don't want to see that potential lost as Anduin's girlfriend. That's kind of my whole thing on it.
Yeah, so, and I agree with you. I think that if she was only introduced in order to be a love interest, that's just bad. or at least suboptimal at best. Like if we're giving it the
boring.
It's boring. We've seen it a million times. It's happened on tons of TV shows and comics and video games where a new character is introduced specifically to be just that, a love interest. I think she is potentially one of the more interesting recent additions to the game world, at least in my opinion. I think she offers an interesting new perspective, and she's probably the first person to have I don't want to call it non-devotional, because they are definitely devoted to the light, but a different way of thinking about the light since Velen was introduced. Right. So not to go completely off topic, but I think it's interesting because when the light was first really introduced into the game, it wasn't the light. If you want to go back, and I think it's relevant since they're releasing the original Warcraft games as, updated res models now. The original institution of religion was essentially just Catholicism and versus Satanism. I'm generalizing. It was a little more fantasied up than that, but that's really what it boiled down to.
Yeah, it was like take historical religion, file the serial numbers off of it, and make demons real. That was pretty much what you had.
Yeah. And then you introduce the light as another aspect of that later on, where you basically take even further file the Christianity off of it and sort of let it blossom into its own thing, which helped spawn an entire cosmology. Because let's be honest, it did. Until Velen came along, what the light was in Warcraft 3 was what the light always was. Even when we got World of Warcraft, even when we were going to the tomb of, why can't I remember his name? Paladin.
Which one?
The one that Arthas killed.
You mean, there's the one that Arthas killed. There's a few of those. Do you mean Uther? Yes,
thank you. I don't know why I could not remember Uther. My brain.
I didn't know if you meant. Does he mean Uther? Does he mean that other one, Davinrad? There's at least two that I can come up with.
But even okay, so even then with the Uther's tomb and going there and being able to interact with the ghost of Uther, so to speak, or a sliver of its mortal vestige, the light was still the vehicle with which that was happening, but it wasn't really fleshed out fully as to its own thing. And then Velen came along and gave it a personification that it hadn't had before. It was a cosmic entity. It was a force. It was something that was granting him visions of the future. It was something that helped guide him to save his people. It was something that was more than just, I'm going to cast a healing wave now and call it good. And it's been sort of at that level, even with the addition of like Zira and a lot of the other stuff that's come out. It all sort of fits still in with that. And now comes Faerin, who has a new way of looking at the light. And it is much more, I don't know if holistic is the right term for it. It's a lot more, there's a lot of deference to it. There's a lot of deference to it as an entity, as not just a tool, not just a thing that has a will of its own, and not something that can just, abandon you, right? Like, it's one of those lessons that she teaches Anduin, where it's like, the light doesn't abandon you. The light doesn't really, that's not what it cares. It doesn't really think about it like that. It will be there when you call upon it. You just have to call upon it. You have to unblock yourself. And then he does. And she's teaching him not just about the light in this instance. She's giving him life lessons that the people around him can't. Jaina is just coming off of being completely emotionally devastated over the course of years, and is now rife with new responsibility as the new Lord Admiral of the Kultirans. You have Gen Greymane, who just recently started really developing his emotions beyond that which was just rage and revenge. Turellian is just in this expansion starting to come to terms with his own emotions and thought processes on things.
Well, plus, Turellian is 1,000 years removed from the kind of struggles that Anduin is having.
Oh, yeah.
You've lived 1,000 years and you've been bathed in the light for most of that time. It's you don't have doubts about it. Mm-hmm. It comes when you call it. It's there to help you. It's your sword and your shield. He doesn't have doubt. So how is he going to help Anduin with his doubt?
His other big confidant is for now no longer a diamond dwarf, but has been a speaker of Azeroth for the last how long in game? 15 years? 10,
I wouldn't say 15, but definitely 10.
At least about a decade in game terms, right? Since the cataclysm happened, you have and he's dealing with his own stuff, dealing with getting his family back and everything that's happening with the dwarves, which is not an insignificant amount.
Yeah, plus he's never really been a paladin.
No,
or a priest.
Correct, and even when Anduin was in Ironforge learning, it wasn't with Magni that he was doing it. Magni put him with the head of the priesthood of the dwarves, right? I can't remember the father's name, but
he also had that the guard that they assigned to him that he was really friendly with, who ended up getting cacked. The other thing is the way Faerin's relationship with the light works is she does something that others don't do. It's personal.
Yes,
and it's personal in a way where she doesn't treat the light as this unknowable alien force of power. She treats the light as something that is inside her. That everyone is a little piece of light. Everyone is is a candle, and you have to if you ever feel the need to call upon it, you need to sit there and cultivate that connection with that little candle inside yourself and let it roar into flame.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that level of just how can your light? You're still here. You're still alive. Obviously, the light has not abandoned you, or that wouldn't be the case. The light is just something we all have, and we're all involved with. To Faerin, I'm not saying that this is how it works in cosmological terms. I'm just saying Faerin's approach is this is a personal thing. The light can no more abandon you than you can abandon you. In fact, it can't even more than you can't, because you can actually abandon yourself. You can throw away everything you've been and become someone new, but the light can't do that. The light will always be illuminating you. So that's an interesting aspect of her character. And she's been through some bleep. I was going to say the actual word, but I'm not gonna. She's been through a lot, and when you look at her, she's lost her eye, she's lost her hand, she's strapping that she has a prosthesis that she uses to strap that thing onto her arm, and she doesn't even want it improved. Someone was like, "Yeah, I'm totally gonna fix it up. I've got all these ideas," and she's like, "No, I just want it to do what it does. I'm very happy with its current use as thing to keep a shield on. I don't want whatever you're talking about. I'm comfortable with it as it is." And that's a big part of her identity, is that she has made this loss, into a shield. It protects her. So out of all that, she has a very different relationship with people and with the light. And she's extremely compassionate through experience. She's not compassionate just because she's compassionate. She's compassionate because she has grown up at this place. Keep in mind that she was basically the only kid on the boat.
Yep.
She was essentially a stowaway, and she's kind of grown up around these people who are all devout, but they're not devout the way she is because she has had this experience. And it is an interesting character. It's one of the things I'd really hate to see get lost.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm trying to get is I think her value right now, as far as if it's more than just a love interest, is really this perspective she brings that Anduin needs. And it's a lot of finding yourself, right? That's the message that she sort of portrays. And it's a lot of it has to do with, like you said, that experience that, she was the only kid on the boat. She's growing up underground with the survivors of what happened to them, dealing with a lifetime of essentially war with the Nerubians, because that's what happened there. And then dealing with the dark horrors of night, and now dealing with the active black blood and all that happens with there. There's a reason she's a staple at the orphanage. It's not just because she's, that's what you do. That's not just because it's her duty, but it's because of how she found herself and helping others do that. She's a guide and a confidant. And if that blossoms into something more later on down the road, that's fine. But I don't think it should be her primary value. I totally agree that you can have a love interest character, and that they could be love interests for each other. It doesn't have to be she's his love interest. They can be each other's love interests. Exactly.
That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is just if you introduce this character, I don't want her to exist just to be X's girlfriend. Just I really feel like we need to get Agra back because we have not done her justice. And there's a lot of other female characters I could say this about.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing too. Like, and funnily enough, I was thinking about this. Ilaria and Turellian have probably one of the healthiest relationships of all the NPCs in the game, despite their,
vast divergences.
Vast divergence, right? Like, and I think that's really highlighted this expansion of no matter how far apart they went, like they come back and like they've, again, do the stay a while and listen whenever you see the bubble, especially with those two in proximity to each other. Because it's a lot of reconciling what happened and a lot of recognizing why the other one chose what they did. And there's a lot of, I don't want to say codependency is not the right term.
No, but there's a respect that they each have for the other that allows them to accept that they are different. They have different approaches. They have different belief systems, but they love each other and respect the other's opinion. Yeah. And that means that when Turellian sees that Ilaria is doing something that for anybody else he would probably be immediately offended by it, he's willing to stop and listen because he knows who she is. And in her way, she offers him the same courtesy. She understands that in a lot of ways, the two people she loves most in the world are both divergently opposed to her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she loves her son, who is practically his father, and she loves his father. And those people, because they are not remotely like her, it has forced her to always examine what she is doing, what she is thinking, what she is feeling. So, yeah, I think that they're an interesting couple for that reason. I think that they were not nearly as strong before World of Warcraft, frankly. World of Warcraft did a lot to make them interesting characters. Not that they weren't interesting before, but there was very much mostly in books. You didn't see it in the games at all. And so I think that in terms of what their characterization is like, you get a lot of good bits between them because it's building on that history. For that matter, I think that Jaina and Thrall's "we're never going to get together" thing is actually one of the most interesting relationships in World of Warcraft, in the Warcraft canon, because it is clear that they are attracted to each other. Mm-hmm. Maybe not like we're not dating or anything, or we never really wanted to, but you remind me of this person who is so important to me, but you're not really her. And for her part, he is assigned to her that she has made the right decisions. That in the end, her willingness to trust people, even people that ended up doing horrible things to her, wasn't entirely wasted. Like, it's not all orcs' fault what one orc did. And she's at a place now where she's learned that lesson, and he's kind of the symbol of it. But at the same time, he's there. When they need each other, they're there. And I like that about them. But it took them a long time to get there. It wasn't always very good in the game. So that's another reason why I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea of just introducing a love interest to be a love interest. Yeah,
and I think that's where the strength of this character really lies, is the thing. And to get to the root of the question, what the ramifications will be, how do we see it going? If they do proceed with this like I think they're going to, I think it needs to be an organic development of the relationship. It needs to be something where Anduin is himself, finds himself, and then the two interact after that, because that's the other thing that hasn't been finished yet, is that Anduin, yes, he can call on the light again, but he hasn't really, it's been a theme since before the storm. It's been a theme in many of the books, especially in Madeline Rowe's last books that she wrote, where, he's sitting, I will always remember the scene. He's sitting at the tavern, gives a different name. He's just learning about the people around him. But it was very apparent that Anduin's still figuring out who he is. And he doesn't want to be his dad, but he also can't not be his dad. He has to find his own path that accomplishes what he wants to do, as well as keep the human civilization intact, and well as defend Azeroth, as well as deal with all of his past traumas. The boy's got so much to deal with. It's not fair, but he needs to find himself. And if he finds himself and Faerin is still there and they interact after that point, and it's not a case of she saves him and he's smitten with her because of it, then that's fine. Right, like
another way to put this is that Mr. Miyagi and does not get together with Daniel. So if she's just there to be his magical savior, then their relationship shouldn't go anywhere even close to a relationship. It should just be she's like a mentor who taught him. If you want to have a romantic relationship between characters, they need to be equals.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not when I say equals, I don't mean they need to all be exactly like a checklist. I just mean that they need to each bring their own thing to it. And I think that could absolutely happen. It is not where they are right now.
Yeah, and then we have plenty of expansion left. We have plenty of interaction that's going to happen. And judging
have two more expansions on the
I
on the
was
horizon.
just going to say, even regardless of what happens here, if it doesn't have a payoff, at the very least, I think that because of Faerin's character, who she is, and the empire that she is a part of, they will have a role going into Midnight at the very least, and that story may continue to pick up steam and develop there. Yeah, we got plenty of road left here on this travel, I think. But it will be interesting to see, because I think in a lot of ways, she is probably one of my favorite characters that they've introduced to the game in a long, long time. I love the way she's written. I love the way she's voiced. And I really do not want her getting relegated to Agra status, because nothing would make me angrier.
I mean, for a degree, I remember when we were wandering around, and I remember we were talking on a different lore watch, and I said something to you, and you stopped and thought, no, and then you went and looked, and you were like, oh my God. Well, I'm like, they're all half elves. Have you noticed that they're all half elves? And you were like, what do you mean? I'm like, go look at them. They're all half elves. And they're all half elves. Every single one of them has a half elf model, not an elf model, not a human model. They have the ears that, what's his name? Blue guy loves Sunwells. Why can't Caligos? They have the ears that Caligos' model had. Blue guy loves Sunwells. What's his name? God, I'm getting old. Caligos. Yeah. So I remember that thinking, this is really interesting that they're to the point where they are practically their own people.
Yeah, which is good.
Which is great, because it makes the possibilities of going over there, of going to wherever they are and seeing what they've been doing for at least hundreds, if not thousands of years. You know what I mean? Like, just wow, I want to see this. And it's really awesome how well we've gotten this taste of it in this expansion, and that it even makes sense why they're there and what they're doing. So yeah, I definitely want to see more of Faerin. I want to see more of her interacting with the place she's from, that she barely remembers because she left it as a child and hasn't been back since. You know, there's a lot to that. It's kind of similar to when Chen and his niece, whose name is escaping me at the moment, despite the fact that she was playable in Heroes of the Storm, when they went, thank you, Lily. When they went to Pandaria, they were Pandaren, but they'd never been to Pandaria.
Mm-hmm.
They were from the Wandering Isle. So yeah, it was like this. They could be a POV character while also being a bridge. I think Faerin absolutely has that potential, and she's just interesting. She's an interesting person. She's kind of like the fact that she is, extremely devout in her faith in the light, but not at all judgmental, makes her a standout in portrayals of religious characters in video games. Because half the time they're either sanctimonious or outright fanatical, and she's neither. And I do not want to see her turned into so-and-so's girlfriend.
Yeah, agreed. But I think we're going to move on to the next question here. This one comes from Seabread. Since there's a Diablo 4 kick in this show, are the Realm Walkers we fight in the season the same type of monster we fight in Pandemonium in Diablo 3?
Yes. They are. It's straight up. There's 1-to-1. The model is almost exactly the same. There's lore things in the game saying that these ones are just ones that Mephisto has control over. They are the same things.
I don't think I've seen that yet. The lore thing from Mephisto. So
yeah, it's in one of the books you find on the way. No, they are absolutely, categorically, unequivocally the same.
All right. I think that's a pretty definitive answer. We don't get very many of those on the show. I have nothing to add to it.
Yeah, it's very rare. Usually it's like, this time, nope, same thing. There's no doubt.
All right. So this next one comes from Dai Kaiju. My current belief is that since the events of Diablo 3 and ROS, the high heavens and burning hells are freaked out about humanity finally coming into its own and deciding it's had enough of both sides' interference. Hence the reason the high heavens have walled themselves off and the burning hells getting more aggressive about corrupting humanity to their side. Thoughts?
Yes. That time it was a joke.
Yeah. There's a lot more to talk about here, but go ahead.
No, I'm not trying to interrupt you. I just thought it was a good time to make that joke. It's like, let's just pretend we're going to do this with everything. No, I think there's certainly the existence of the Nephilim has always been something that has made the high heavens uncomfortable, to the point where when they discovered the existence of Sanctuary, it was a close call on whether or not they were going to wipe it out. And the only reason they didn't was because ties go to ties with the Aegir's Council go with the defeat of the proposal. You can't just tie. You have to actually win the vote to do the thing. So when Tyrael was like, no, he basically caused a tie. And because of that tie, the other really grumpy one has a big spear. Imperius, thank you. I can never remember anyone's names. Why do they all have I names? Imperius wanted to just blow the place up. Straight up, just let's kill everything. Let's take this thing down to bedrock. And he thought it would be him and Tyrael voting together. He thought Malthael would vote with him, and in the end, he didn't get that, and he didn't get his destroy the world, and he was super grumpy about it. Like to this, like when you see him, every time you see him in Diablo 3, one of the reasons he's so mad is he doesn't even think you should exist, and there you are in heaven. Which is like, imagine thinking that thing is a horrible thing that shouldn't even exist. It's a loathsome aberration and destruction. And then it shows up and saves you. It's a little bit more understandable. It's kind of like if you were fighting a Shoggoth and the Shoggoth was like, no, I'm here to help. But like, you have multiple beaks. You scream in the night. We'll go, yeah, but still, I don't want you guys to get destroyed. I'm going to save you. You are an abomination against all things good. What are you talking about? It's like that. So, yeah, the high heavens have always been uncomfortable with the Nephilim. They're doubly uncomfortable. Even Tyrael was uncomfortable when he realized that the Nephilim that he was following around in Diablo 3 was more powerful than him and more powerful than any archangel or demon lord, because it had beaten both of them. It had beaten every demon lord fused into one, and it had beaten an archangel who renounced his role, and he was using the power of all those demons at the same time as his self. And both of those lost to this one mortal who still was going to die someday, and therefore would probably get grumpy about that at some point and want to make it not happen. And I think that's the crux of why the heavens are uncomfortable with the Nephilim, because they don't know what's worse. The fact that some Nephilim don't seem to die, or that even if they do die, you can't tell what's going to happen then. They break all the rules constantly. And it's disconcerting if you are a heavenly being. You think we understand the rules by which creation should exist under, and you don't follow any of them. What is that? For the demons, I mean, I'm going to let Joe talk, so I'm going to shut up here, but I do have ideas about the demons, but I am going to shut up so you can talk.
I mean, you can keep going, but I mean, I think we've talked about this a little bit before. I don't know that just fear of the Nephilim is what's caused them to be walled off. I think that there's...
we actually don't know. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that.
We don't know, but I think there's more to it than that. I think there has to be more to it than that. And the reason I think so is because, and we talked about this on the regular podcast, so this was a question that was answered in, and we've talked about it here during our Diablo stuff, which highly go back and watch or listen to the Diablo 4 episodes if you can. You are looking at dealing with just the aftermath of what happened in Diablo 3 and Reaper of Souls is probably occupying a lot of their time. The High Heavens were sieged, right? Like they were not just, lightly attacked. There was a massive siege. Attacked. Yeah, it was, but I mean, and it wasn't just the Nephilim going up and like them destroying things, because we did, but how many angels were twisted? How many souls were warped? The very fabric of reality that, and I'm air quoting reality here because the High Heavens is a weird place, just like the Burning Hells are. How much of that was warped and shifted and corrupted or made different than what it was? Bodies and souls being infused into pillars. How much of the heavens, when we were running through it, looked just like the Burning Hells? They're probably trying to deal with all of that too. And then there's the other side of the coin. And we talked about this a little bit. Diablo died in the high heavens. We don't know what that will do. We know that angels can fall and become fallen angels and become demons, which means presumably they can be processed through the burning hells. For all we know, Inarius may come back as a demon after what happened in Diablo 4's storyline. In fact, it may be very likely. Who knows? Him and Lilith may be reigning as Demon King and Queen at some point.
See, here's the thing, though. I did want to mention this the last time you brought that up. I will say this. In order for an angel to fall and become a demon, they have to be broken mentally.
Tell me that he wasn't.
No, I'm not saying he wasn't, but I'm saying Diablo wasn't broken mentally. He wasn't, or the opposite. Diablo wasn't uplifted. Diablo didn't have any sense of, what am I doing? I could have been doing good things all this time. No, there's no sign of the inverse for Diablo. I therefore don't think he's going to come back through the Crystal Arch, because the Crystal Arch is there for essences that have essentially been purged. Like, we know that Malthael will come back through the Crystal Arch, even though he died in Pandemonium, even though he died possessed of an evil object, because at no point did he think what he was doing was evil, or was he acting for evil's sake. That's the difference. That's why I don't think Diablo's coming back through the Crystal Arch. However, I do think we have to talk about the fact that Diablo did incredible violence to the Crystal Arch, to the point where at one point every angel around you drops and their armor gets blown up and they're just gone. They're incapable of keeping their essence in the forms they usually keep. We know they come back, but there's a disruption so great that at one point you are it. You are the only thing that can even stand up to him. There's nothing else. Imperius can't even try. Nobody can try. It's just you. And I think that is something we really have to talk about in terms of what happens in heaven after Diablo. Diablo's presence in heaven is like the ultimate insult. It's something that if they were human, it would cause PTSD. What does it do to beings that don't think that reality has... Only one angel in all of heaven thinks that there's such a thing as, the ability to circumvent fate. And it, ironically, it's the one that's the Archangel of Fate, because they know they can't see the Nephilim's fate. So these are beings that believe very heavily in fate. If this thing happened, it had to happen. And how do they deal with what they went through? Whether or not Diablo gets to come back through the Crystal Arch, I certainly think Diablo introduced corruption to the Crystal Arch. What if angels start coming out of that thing half demon? What if the corruption just keeps spawning out of it? Can you even use it? Are there numbers even being replenished?
That was where I was going with it too. That's the other side of the coin that we don't know. We haven't interacted with an angel since then, aside from an Arius who
has been cut off this whole time.
So we don't know if they're able to be reborn. We don't know if the Crystal Arch is functioning. We don't know if it's quasi-functioning. It's in a weird spot for the angels at this point that we just don't have enough information. And again, it's just as likely that they're just dealing with all of this more than anything else.
There's also something to mention in terms of what we've seen in Diablo 4, especially Vessel of Hatred. Because we have seen that entities that are on the level of power of an angel or a demon can be created out of people's opinions about some dead guy. Like when the spirit of Akarat that we deal with and sorry guys, it's spoilers, but come on, it's been out for a while. The spirit of Akarat tells you up front, it doesn't know if it's really Akarat. It's like, I don't know if I am truly the spirit of the being who preached as Akarat, or if I'm just this idea people have about him based on, everything they heard about him. Yeah,
because don't forget, we've established that the gods and spirits and stuff like that, the entire spirit world in general, is constructed on human belief. It warps it. Ultimately, every human is a descendant of a Nephilim. Every Nephilim is a descendant of an angel and a demon. And every Nephilim was born in a world created by the World Stone, which is part of Anu, the creator of existence. Every human has a little bit of that in them at all times. They have the combined essences of an angel and a demon, which means they have both halves of the stuff that was torn apart to make Tathamet and the Diamond Warrior Anu. And they have this world that they're living on was created purely by the World Stone. So, in a way, all these little human beliefs create things. Humans create things in a way that angels and demons can't. But can angels and demons be affected by that? Is it possible that Malthael's strike on Earth has created an opinion of Malthael
even if they don't know who Malthael is, but some people do. Some people did know who he was. If the word of what happens enough, there could be now an entity of death that exists on Azeroth. Not on Azeroth. Sanctuary. It's on Azeroth. Look out, guys. But there could be an entity that exists on Sanctuary right now that is effectively what Malthael presented himself as. It's a Reaper, and it's death, and it's born out of people's belief. Think about how many people died. The idea that there's an angel of death might just create one. And what does that mean in terms of the cosmology of the setting? Like, can heaven exist out? It obviously existed before humans existed. Can it survive what they think about it? And maybe that's one of the reasons they're so afraid to interact with it. If you go there and the humans find out you're doing stuff and you become infamous enough or famous enough that they have opinions of you, they might make you into that. And maybe that's why Inarius couldn't go back. They were afraid he'd contaminate them.
Do you think that's how Tyrael came back as a human? Because he was always the closest to humanity, and the legend of him being essentially one of them.
Enough people knew who Tyrael was that they thought of him not as this divine heavenly presence, but as a person that they spoke to. And so when he cast off his angelic nature, maybe that's why he turned into a human. I don't know, but certainly it's a possibility. And he was, despite the fact that he had no demonic essence, he was biologically fully human. Mm-hmm. To the point where he's, Lorath had to go through a process of explaining to him that you have to eat, but you have to eat in installments, and you would keep having to do this for the rest of your life, and you couldn't just get all your days eating out of the way in the morning. You had to, just imagine having to explain every aspect of biological existence to a celestial being who is now fully biological. It's funny because we all, I laughed, but at the same time, it's also kind of horrifying how fully divorced Tyrael was from the thing he had become. Well, imagine that happening to every angel. Of course, they'd be afraid of that. And it did happen to him. Think about the danger. Think about what happened with Odyssean. Odyssean could have destroyed them.
Mm-hmm.
And think about what that means. Every Nephilim could reach a point where it's a destructive force unlike anything ever seen in the cosmos. And every human is potentially a Nephilim in seed. Yeah, sure, we don't want them to become part of the demon armies, but it's almost like you're looking at it going, okay, the demons want to play with that. Good luck to you. Maybe it's just safer to just let them try. Let them go ahead and try to corrupt them. It doesn't look like it's work. It's like trying to corrupt nitroglycerin. Go ahead. Maybe you can make dynamite, or maybe you'll blow yourself up. And we don't want to risk blowing ourselves up. So yeah, go ahead. That's one of the possibilities. I mean, the demons have never really needed. They're demons. That's what they are. They're going to do the potentially stupid thing that might work out for them. They're chaos. They're violence. They're like every emotion people have, but the worst possible interpretation of it.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, yeah, they're going to do stupid things. But I can imagine the heavens going look, this is too risky for us to get involved with. Especially
at this time, right? We have our own stuff to deal with. We have everything else we got to worry about. We can't deal with what's down there. The other side of the question, and I know Matt has opinions on this, and I'm going to let him go off in here in a second. But this is definitely an opportunity for the demons. And while it's never really been a thing that they've had to worry about, a ton of angelic intervention in the past, because the war has always been sort of on the fronts of the burning hells, more or less. This is definitely an opportunity for the greater evils to at least make a play, which is probably why Mephisto is able to do as much as he is right now. Not only from our own stupidity, but I have to have a suspicion that they have a level of control over their manifestation. Mephisto's been gone for how long, right? Up until this point, because he wasn't in Diablo.
Years.
About 50 years.
Well, actually, the Diablo 3 is 50 years ago, right?
Longer than that, yeah. Sure. Yeah. So it's longer
Diablo
than that, Diablo 2.
Years ago. The last time we see Mephisto as an independent entity on his own is Diablo 2, which is a solid 30 years before Diablo 3.
So it's been almost 100 years.
Yeah, he's been out for a while. But the interesting thing about Mephisto is that he spent a lot of time before he gets caught up with by adventurers preparing the world around him for what he's doing now.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a sense this plan isn't going to work. And even if it does work, I don't trust my brothers. I know what they're like. And I know that Diablo has got another plan, because whilst I am smarter than he is surprisingly deceitful. So I'm going to plan for that. And Baal doesn't have a plan. Baal never has a plan. Baal's plan is break it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have to plan for Baal, but I do have to recognize that I cannot go up against Baal because I'll lose. In a one-on-one fight, nobody is beating Baal because Baal is destruction itself. As a result, you got Mephisto planning all this stuff where we're kind of seeing just how much time he spent seeding it. Vessel of Hatred and Diablo 4 really make the point that this is all Mephisto has been waiting for this. This is exactly what he has been waiting for. In a way, his daughter coming back was the best move possible for him. And even possibly something he was planning for. So yeah, I definitely think where Mephisto is working on an interesting plot here.
Yeah. I don't know.
We should have more.
No, I was going to say, I don't know what else to add to that besides the fact that, like, again, it's this perfect opportunity for them. Go ahead.
Here's what I'm going to say about that. First off, you're completely right. Everything Joe just said is very interesting and it has a lot of validity to it. I also think to a certain degree, this is the worst time possible for them. And here's why. Yes, the angels have pulled themselves back into heaven and have locked the door and are not interfering. So yeah, great time to make our move. But they are all at about the weakest they have ever been. Because at the end of Diablo 3, they basically, during Diablo 3, they all got jammed together inside a Black Soulstone, and Diablo took control of all of them, was using all of their power.
Yeah, well, and so here's my counter. I have a counterpoint to that, though.
Yeah, but I'm not done with the point.
Go ahead.
You can't have a counterpoint yet. When they got out of that, that's the point where they all began to start to regenerate. During that period of time where, 90% of humanity was destroyed, the world was essentially in ruins, and they had lost control over their realms as they went back into them to regenerate. We hear that from Mephisto. You see, as we're going into Mephisto's realm, that it is not ruled. There's nobody in charge. There's a bunch of little fiefdoms, to the point where one duke could give somebody permission to go to Mephisto's palace and not even worry about it, because there's nothing Mephisto could do to stop him. I think that is why they're doing this now, because they know if they let somebody else take the initiative, they'd be in trouble.
I also think I think there's a lesson that was learned here by Mephisto during the whole events of Diablo 3, which is Diablo had a lot of influence to the outside world while he was stuck inside of that Soulstone.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to do a lot of stuff that, in theory, he should not have been able to do. I think Mephisto learned. I don't think
Mephisto needed to learn that, because he learned that from his own experience in his Soulstone that we saw at the end of Diablo 2. What did he do from inside that Soulstone? He took over the Zacharoon Church.
That's fair, but I think that the level of influence extended even further, at least in here. And I think that lesson, let's compare it, right? So when he was taking over the church, it still was very much a human church. He took over a body. He was able to make decisions and do things, but the world itself, and maybe it was just too subtle, didn't really warp.
See, I don't know that that's necessarily because he couldn't do that. I think it's much more along the lines of he was trying not to do that.
Maybe. And maybe there's...
You see, we go back through the stuff you see in Diablo 4 when you're going to all the places Mephisto effectively prepared. There's hatred sown into the world. And he did all this back before Diablo 2. All those places you go to that are completely the ground is seeped in hatred, like the PvP area, or like the tomb that you go into for the Quahagen, all of that stuff. It's rotten and festering and just everywhere. He could do that. He just chose to do it in places where most people weren't going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're right in that he's learned a lesson in terms of, I don't think the lesson is, Diablo had way more influence than I thought, I need to copy him. I think the lesson was, Diablo successfully faced me. I fell for it. I got manipulated by him. They all know that they're all demons and they all hate each other. That's never been even remotely questioned, right?
Sure.
But they've never really stopped to think about, the Dark Exile, they set that up to let the Lessers basically banish them to Sanctuary. They never really thought about getting beaten by anything. Then they get to Sanctuary, they get beaten like 3 times. Now, was one of those times absolutely part of their plan? Yes. But the other, they didn't see the Soul Stones coming, they just adapted to them. And in terms of Diablo's plan, absolutely nobody saw that coming until they found themselves stuck in the Black Soul Stone with him. And we still don't know what happened to them after that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a ton of things to think about. I was talking to my wife about this because we were discussing Diablo in preparation for me doing the show, quite frankly. And I said to her, I'm always trying to explain it to people, like, if you think about the power of the primes versus the lessers, the primes get the lion's share of the power. Of if you think of it as Tathamet's power divided, 60% went to the 3 primes, 40% went to the 4 lessers. That means that each prime has like 20% of Tathamet's might, which means that each prime is able to take out 2 lessers with relative ease. Like, altogether, all 3 primes versus all 4 lessers, there's no chance. The lessers can't win. But if the lessers could gang up on a prime, 3 of them could potentially beat the prime. Now, this isn't like one-to-one true, because for one thing, there's plenty of other demons that also have a share of Tathamet's power. Secondly, we could argue that the power of Tathamet and the power of the Diamond Warrior Anu that the angels are spreading is technically infinite. They are each 1/2 of an infinite creation. So there might not be a hard and fast power rule. But what we do see here is, for the first time, the limiting factor on the demons has always been their inability to truly cooperate. What happened when all 7 of them were in one form, answering to one will? It stormed heaven by itself. So I think that's part of what we're looking at. The demons have never felt so powerful and yet also felt so disadvantaged at the same time. Because on the one hand, they did it. They stormed heaven. They corrupted the Crystal Arch. On the other hand, they didn't do it. One of them did it, and it did it by tricking all the rest of them. And it wasn't even the one who's usually good at tricking people.
Yeah, but I mean, and I think maybe that's part of it too, that I think plays into it, because Diablo didn't exactly do it all on his own either, right?
No, absolutely not. And that's an interesting thing, isn't it? That Diablo didn't do it he didn't do it the way Mephisto did. Mephisto used mortals like cattle. He stole a body and then was so busy being tricky about it. How did Diablo get his most loyal minion? How did he get Adira? He asked her.
Yep.
And she's the one who came up with the plan.
Yep.
She's the one who did it. Mephisto, for all his intelligence, for all his evil, he doesn't trust humans enough to make one into a servant and then take its advice.
But that preparation or the use of an outside person, I think is a lesson learned too. Because like you said, I think he never trusted them, which, fair. But look at what he did this time around. At every step of the Diablo 4 Diablo 4 game and expansion, what happens? You're saved, you deal with the wolf, you're saved by the blood of Mephisto, essentially. You stop him from being consumed, because that's what you do. You're, the big dumb hero, but you're essentially doing everything for him
without him having to tell you how to do it.
Exactly. He challenges you just enough, gives you just enough incentive. And I liken it for those of you that play at home, I liken it to playing a game of Magic the Gathering Commander, where you're politicking that I'm not the threat here. We got to worry about this other person over here. And it's a perfectly reasonable argument for the time being, until it's not anymore. And by the time you realize it's not anymore, it's too late.
And he even tells you he's going to do that. He
does. He's very upfront about it, which I think is absolutely hysterical.
It's disarming. What it is disarming. And I think he's very good at realizing, okay, I need this person to come up with their own plans, because my daughter would see my plans coming because she is my daughter. As my daughter, she is part of me.
Well, there's an element of that too, even with the discussion between There's even an element of discussion about that between you and Narelle in the current expansion. When you finally get everything, I don't want to say sorted, but when you catch up to her, one of the first things she asks you is, why me? Why did you make me be the one that has to decide this and bear this burden? And even you, as the big hero, you recognize, because I can't be trusted, because I'm compromised. And if it was you making the decisions purely by yourself, she probably would have. And I mean, to be fair, I think she did know all the way up to the end. But the expectation was that you were going to be the one that made the decision. The minute you take the human option, the minute your character turns around and says, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to do it my way, or I'm going to remove myself from the equation and let somebody else decide, everything goes sideways. Because again, you were the compromised person. Now it's no longer a problem. You're not worried anymore, right? Like you do the I don't want to say the curveball, but I don't know another way to say it. Like you literally take the option that nobody expected you to take, except maybe Mephisto.
Here's the thing about that too. I think to a certain degree, it's like the old concept of this is a comic book concept, but it's based on a chess term. There's a chess term called castling, where you take your rook and your queen and you effectively change their positions.
Rook and king.
Rook and king, yeah. And in comic books, it's come to mean, okay, I'll use the people who use the most. Superman and Batman do this all the time. Superman's fighting Captain Marvel, Batman's fighting Hawkman. So they castle. They switch terror. It's like, no, you fight Captain Marvel, I'll fight Hawkman. Batman has lots of ways to beat Captain Marvel. Superman can just literally overpower Hawkman, even with like the magic glove that hits him with the fear. It's not a fair fight. Intellectually, it's not a fair fight for a 12-year-old, even with the wisdom of Solomon, to go up against Captain Crazy Preparedness Man. And Hawkman is just Hawkman, and Superman is Superman. It is not a fair fight. That's what we see in that moment. They castle. Narelle is given the choice because it's not a good choice for the player character to be making. They have spent this entire game basically being a juggernaut of destruction. They haven't been thinking, and it's the only time that thinking is important. Get the person who thinks all the time to do it. It makes sense. It's also terrible for another reason, because Narelle is like a child whose mom had just died, who lost her hand. It's a lot to put on her, but at the same time, it does make sense.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing too, is like, I think Mephisto, in a fit of, I don't want to say brilliance, but it seems like he always has that expectation that that's what's going to happen from the very beginning, from the very moment you see him, because you see him before you ever meet Lilith, before you ever meet her cult, before you're ever fed her blood.
Yeah.
You meet the wolf. The wolf is there when you are sitting there, in the cave sheltering from the storm. He expects you to take the hero choice. And that is the hero choice because it is the smartest thing for you to do. And that's the downfall for us, but exactly what he expected. And we do exactly that. And he gets Narelle, and Narelle is now, again, a scared child who's going to make decisions as a scared child would, trying to do the best she can with her limited understanding of her position in the world. And to be fair, I'm not trying to talk crap about Narelle. I think she's a great character, but it's very apparent that she has no idea what's going on.
It would be impossible for her to be like, a steely, cold, determined person at this point in her life. It's just, you're asking too much.
And he knows that. And so that gets him where he needs to be. That gets him what he wants.
You have to remember too, that I think there's an interesting thing that Mephisto, in a way, has done the thing that nobody else has bothered to do. And Arias hasn't bothered. And Arias is the father of humanity, but he never bothered to actually try to empathize with or understand them. Whereas Mephisto is trying to. And I don't think he's fully successful because he doesn't have half of the equation, but he studied Anarias. He looked at Anarias. He said to himself at one point, and I think Lilith even says it, Anarias and I aren't very different. And there's that interesting aspect to it. Anarias was a ball of anger when he met Lilith. He was angry about the eternal conflict. He wanted it over. And if he couldn't end it, he wanted to escape from it. And that's the thing. We've learned from all this that angels and demons aren't as strictly locked into their role as they want to pretend. And we don't just learn that about angels through Anarias. There's a demon that you meet. I want to say it's in the steppes, the dry steppes. When you're there, he's basically just collecting treasures and living inside of a person. And when you talk to him, he's like, I like it here. Yeah, there's murder and all that, but I don't want it to get destroyed, and I don't want the demons to win, because then it'll just be like hell, and hell sucks. I want this world to continue as it is. Now, that's not being good, but it is being not like you'd expect a demon to be. And that means that demons can also change, which brings us back to the thing we were talking about before, about why I didn't think we were going to see Diablo come back through the Crystal Arch. I want you to think about this possibility. What if Diablo actually did have a change of heart or mind whilst being defeated the first time in Diablo 3? What if he looked at, I got all this way, I took all the power from my brothers and sisters, I did everything, and I still lost to this one person. There's no plan better than my plan. There's no way to win. We know that Imperius is supposedly Valor, and we know that he is the one that snapped and tried to kill Diablo, and thus caused him to escape in the Wrath Short. Their dynamic is one of opposition, but if Imperius is starting to fall, what happens with Diablo? Are we going to have two evil forces of fear and destruction, or is one almost forced to rise? What if Diablo comes back as an angelic being because he has to?
Mm-hmm.
Not because he wants to necessarily, not because it's a trick, but because there needs to be a counterbalance. Like, this is just something I've been thinking about. Could you have a Diablo that isn't Diablo anymore? Imagine if there's an angel out there somewhere right now that we don't know about, that thinks it's an angel, that has angelic thoughts, it does angel things, but it's Diablo's life force, and because of that, it's inherently never going to be the thing it thinks it is.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing that I was getting at way long ago when I started talking about them going through the Crystal Arch, right? That's one of the things we talk about with angels. Like they essentially, they're wiped clean. They're programmed from scratch. Their essence becomes whatever it needs to be. The memories are essentially shucked, and they're put back to work. And how would that work for Diablo if he was forced to be? Because they're two sides of the same coin, and we've talked about this at length, right? They all are from the original entity that was everything, from Anduin.
Yeah. Right? They effectively tore itself apart to see what it was, to try and experience something other than everything.
But to me, there is no reason why a demonic entity could not go through the Crystal Arch, that could not be reborn, because it's the same energy. It's all from the same root. Not saying that would happen, but I think it would be very, very interesting to see essentially a light forged Diablo running around.
Just imagine that there's this being that is constantly like, it thinks it's trying very hard to do angel stuff, but it can't help but do it in the worst, most demonic way possible.
Well, yeah, and just think about it, like a giant brutish angel, like we saw with like Azuzu, right? Or Azu. It was
like the ones we saw in when they were working for Malthea.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Reaper type ones. They were like gigantic hulking engines of destruction
that look very similar to the body structure of Diablo. I'm just throwing it out there.
And so there could be this thing. I don't know. There's lots of different ways it could work. I don't think they're going to do it, because I do think they've already established in their own heads, based on the characters that are talking, that both Baal and Diablo are coming back to Sanctuary.
And I think they've been pretty clear about that, because what would a Diablo game be if you didn't have the titular Diablo at some point? Although I am enjoying the fact that Mephisto is getting his time to shine. And I'm interested to see what happens too, because speaking of energies, Mephisto is now in possession of the spirit realm power that was once Akarat's body. And what does that mean? And if it's Akarat's body, does it carry with it the baggage of Akarat? Does it warp who Mephisto is as an entity? Is that the whole theme of Diablo 4 and the coming expansions, is change, evolution, coming back to a whole? Is that what's happening here? Is that what we're going to see in the future? No idea, but it's going to be a wild ride, because we're getting more expansions for Diablo 4. Yeah,
at least one more that we know of, and I'm positive they'll do more, because it's keeping on.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to put out there for people to think about is, I want you to imagine this. What Diablo did to try to become the quote-unquote prime evil almost worked, But there was one problem, was that only one mind was in charge.
Yes.
Tathamet had 7 minds. If
Yep.
all 7 of them were actually united and were all still there, maybe you get Tathamet back. Maybe you could actually have Tathamet, the demon dragon, again. What does that look like?
Ooh, yeah. But I think that's going to be a topic for next time, because we are at time here, friends. So this is my reminder to you that Blizzard Watch is made possible due to the generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, a better chance at having your question answered on our podcast, or the queue, and an ads-free site experience. Again, friends, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line and any special pronunciations of your name. If you want to hit us up on Discord, we have the Q and Podcast Questions channel. Same rules apply. If you are a Patreon subscriber, as a way of saying thank you, we have the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel set aside, where we tend to look there first, where most of these questions came from. Thank you, guys. Same rules apply there as well. And if you don't want to hit us up on Discord and email is not your thing, you can also log into Patreon, submit your questions, and we will be sure to get them into our hands for future shows. Well, with that, folks, we'll see you next week.